I wanted to share an experience I had when I was in high school. I've never really told many people about this, and I'd love to get some feedback and see if what people think about it, and if anyone else has had any similar experience. But so I believe someone was attempting to abduct me when I was in high school. So this was back in the early '80s, like '81 or so, '82, and it was in the fall, like September, October. And um, I grew up in a suburb of Boston. It was a really nice little town, leafy suburb. Multiple generations of my family on both sides had lived there. Lots of history. We had houses from like the 1600s and 1700s. Lots of people who fought in the Revolutionary War. Some interesting like colonial era history. And so anyhow, so it was a nice little town. And this was when working out. This is when it was like right after I think it was the movie Staying Alive came out, so everyone started like working out, right? And a lot of these mom and pop workout places were emerging around the country before they had big chains. So I belonged to this gym that had just opened downtown, and so I worked out that night. It was a school night, like a Monday or Tuesday, and I left around 9 p.m. when they closed, and I was walking home. And I had probably had a total of like 6 blocks to walk. So I was walking through the main road in our town, and I was going to turn left at the main crossroad right at the center of town. So I'm walking, and this car passes, and there are other cars in the downtown, but for some reason it caught my eye, and I looked, so I recognized this car. I watched it as it drove by. I believe I must have like sensed that they were looking at me, right? So, and I saw two guys in the front seat. So I walked to this intersection, and I turn left, and I've got about 3 blocks to go, and then I have to turn right and walk another like 2.5 blocks, 2 blocks. So I walk down the 3 blocks. There's like a post office and a church, and I right across from the church, I turn right onto our street, and I'm walking down the first block, and so I have to walk down this road, and there's another intersecting road, and then I continue, and our house is like 4 or 5 houses down to the left. So I'm walking down this first block, and there aren't a lot of street lights, so it's actually pretty dark. And um, I'm walking. I'm about a third of the way down this block, typical suburban neighborhood, and this car drives past me in the same direction I'm going. And it caught my eye because it was driving so slowly. It was strangely slow. And I looked and I realized it's that car. So I realized that these guys, they were driving the opposite direction I was walking. So I realized they turned around, they took the left, right? Followed me like 3 blocks and then turned right. So they drove ahead of me, and they came to that first intersection and started to turn right. They paused for a while, and of course I'm getting really suspicious and nervous. And then they completed the turn, going very slowly. So I was suspicious. I get to the intersection. I look over, and they're parked right there. So I'm crossing that street, and as I'm like in the middle of the street crossing, I hear 2 car doors open and close. I look over, and it's them. They get out. So I keep walking, and strangely, they walk down to my street and start following me. On the I was on the right side of the street, and they're walking behind me. And I had to make a very quick calculation. I'm like, okay, I have to run, but when do I run? If I run too early, they might catch me, right? So I have to surprise them. And I had to judge, like in the moment, if I had, what was the timing here. So I did this unconscious calculation, like, and I assessed that they were closing in on me, and they were, but I had enough time to get sort of diagonally across from my house, and then I could delay, right, and bolt across the street to my house. So that's what I did. So they were getting really close, And finally, it was time. So I bolted across the street, and in one leap, I was up like 6 steps. We had these wooden steps on the front, so I leapt like 6 steps up to the porch, threw the front door open, ran in, closed the door, said something to my mother like, "Call the police." I ran through to the backyard, and I went down the stairs, the back porch, and I went around, and there were these bushes, and I was peering around the bushes, and these two guys were standing on the sidewalk in front of the house across the street, looking at our house. Can you imagine? So I watched for a minute, and they didn't leave. And eventually, a car came down the street, and they walked off. But the older I get, throughout my life, I never forgot this, and I suspected it was going to be an abduction, that I would have ended up in the trunk, with them dragging me down the street. And this was a quiet, these are like dead streets at night, it's like a leafy neighborhood, no street lights. It was quiet and peaceful. And I bet if they grabbed me, no one would have known. They could have got me into that trunk quickly, and that would have been it. So anyhow, if I'm wondering if anyone has any knowledge of abductions. I'd love to hear if you think that really was going to be an abduction. And then the second thing is if you've had any similar experiences, I would like to hear about them. Thanks.